everybody, this is Lisa Harper, and you are listening to the Not Ready Yet Curating Conversations for the Aging Journey podcast. This is the show that hopefully changes the conversations we have with our loved ones about aging and life decisions. Let's have more honest conversations where we speak the quiet parts out loud. Today we're joined by Amy Cameron O'Rourke, a nationally recognized aging expert, geriatric care manager, and author of The Fragile Years: Proven Strategies for the Care of Aging Loved Ones. For over 30 years, Amy has worked with families navigating one of life's most complex and emotional seasons, caring for aging loved ones. She blends policy insight with hands-on experience to help families navigate the emotional, medical, and logistical challenges of aging with dignity. Amy brings deep compassion, practical wisdom, and a calm voice of reason to every conversation. Together, we'll explore seeking clarity, confidence, and real-world guidance during life's most delicate time. Whether you're just starting to notice changes in your parents or you are deep in the caregiving journey, this conversation is for you. So, Amy, welcome to the podcast. I thank you so much for being here.
It's great to be here. Thank you for asking me, Lisa.
Yes, absolutely. I am such a fan of this book. I do feel it is almost one of those prerequisites for adult children. And talk to us about what you meant by The Fragile Years when you gave it that title.
Well, what I mean is it's a life stage, and it's a life stage that most older adults go through. And when I say older adults, I mean people usually in their 80s. There's a stage, and it is marked by everything slowing down, cognitive processing slowing down, movement slowing down, and the care for a person in the fragile years is dictated by doing less rather than more. If you think about menopause, you get a clear picture in your mind. If you think about the terrible twos, you get a picture in your mind. My goal is to say the fragile years should give a picture for people in their minds as to exactly that this is a life stage.
And a slowing down. And I know that, we hear about daily activities of living, or activities of daily living is kind of something that is there's a certain amount of things we do every day: grooming, being able to be like mobility, transferring yourself from a chair to the car, walking, all those things. So you're saying that it's kind of marked by just a greater difficulty in carrying on those, a slowing down.
Yeah, the industry jargon is ADLs, activities of daily living, and practically that means eating, walking, bathing, dressing. And the stage is marked by everything going slower and moving slower. And when people fight that reality, meaning they have in their mind what they want to do, but their body's not cooperating, when they don't accept on a practical level that they are in a life stage, then trouble begins. They overshoot what they can do. They fall, they break a hip, they go to the hospital. Like, everybody hears about that, but they don't back up to say, what is the stage and what can I do to prevent a fall? What can I do to make sure that I'm healthier in this life stage? And the first tip I would give is stop fighting what your body is telling you.
Yeah. The denial that we see. And I think it's harder sometimes because we're not in the same cities necessarily anymore. And we're talking to people over the phone, and people can give us a good story of what it looks like. However, it really may not be in reality. So are there any hallmarks or anything like you could get, just give as like some guidelines to how to handle this if you start to see some of this decline and slowing down?
I can. What I would say first is develop the art of listening and develop the art of asking really good questions. And by that I mean, when I was listening to my father and he communicated that he was golfing twice a week instead of 5 days a week, I heard that. That told me that he's slowing down. When I watched him walk down to his granddaughter's graduation, he couldn't make it back. We had to get a wheelchair for him. So I give these specific examples so that the question can become, what did you do today? How did your week go? What friends did you run into? What kind of mail did you receive? What did you cook today? Like real specific questions to get an idea of what are their activities. And the other is I will make it a point to do there's a book called My Mother, Your Mother, and it's written by Dennis McCullough. It was published in '08. And I love this book because he recommends a 72-hour annual visit at a minimum. And the goal of that visit is just to be there and observe, not for any other reason, not to get them to do something that you want them to do, but just to be there. It does a couple of things. One, it gives a feel for how things are going that you can maybe put on a good front on the phone, but it's harder to do in person. And the other thing it does is that if something does happen and you haven't been visiting and then you come and visit, it's like, why are you here now? Do you think I'm going to die? Like it sends a message that you might not have intended to send. So asking better questions, and not, are you getting a bath? And not insulting questions. And I'll give you another tip. There's a tendency for families to, they call it role reversal. Now my parents are becoming like my children. And if you believe in role reversal, you will fail in this stage of life with your parent. Because in truth, we never become our parent's parent, never. And if you picture yourself being talked to by your child like you were their child, it's insulting. But people do that because they don't know another way to be. They
Yeah.
don't know that it's a partnership, it's a collaboration, it's a let's go through this together kind of a stage where you're working together to make sure that you're listening well and accommodating what your parent or grandparent need or want, and also communicating what would help you with them in that stage.
Yeah, and I think you said it's not a lack of knowledge on how to do something, it's the lack of the ability is what what's leaving them. And so for them to also be in a way grieving that, it's not like a child. A child you have to teach them so they can on their own. This is not that.
That's
They
it.
already know it's a decline of the ability too. And that is absolutely different.
Yeah, that it's really insightful that you said that. And when you talk about grief, I think that becoming familiar with the stages of grief is critical in this time, because grief is can be staged, and it is staged. And Dr. Kubler-Ross wrote the book. Kubler-Ross wrote a book on death and dying. When there's loss of any kind, there's grief, and the stages denial and sadness and anger and bargaining are all evident in both the family member and the older adult. The older adult experiences maybe the loss of driving or the loss of maybe picking up the mail, and the child is watching their parent become diminished, and that has its own grief. You're losing your parent, and it's right in front of you. You might be in denial. You might be mad at them. You might be bargaining. So it's really important to become, one, self-aware, and also to be aware of where in the stages of grief is your parent, so that you're not creating this collision of grief stages and making the problem that you're trying to solve more complicated because you haven't gotten your own help emotionally.
Right, right. And I do find that's with all good intention because, the sandwich generation is looking at time, energy, all the things, right? Resources. And what's the quickest way for a solution and really with all good intention, of course. However, that is just going to murky the water. And it is more of a conversation. I always say conversation in this type of part of life is it's not a moment in time. You're not going to get a yes or no. It's going to be a process. They're so complex. And people a lot of times have to come to it themselves and in their own time. I read a book and they were saying about, the house is not safe and they had fallen and the adult kids were really concerned. And the mother was adamant about staying just because of all the memories. But it was because they were telling her as soon as they turned in and said, okay, Mom, we hear you. What can we do to make the house safer? Can we bring a main bath? Let's figure out how we do this. Let's get the roof taken care of, because right now your value is decreasing because we just have all this deferred maintenance. As soon as they shifted, she said, I don't want to put all the money into this. That sounds like a lot. Maybe I should just go somewhere. And they were like, what? This has been months of, angst. And as soon as they leaned in and said, because they finally heard her, but then she was even like, no, that's probably not the best decision. But because the approach prior to was do this, or you need to, then she grew roots and it was no. So I think we have to have conversations and listen, and then let the decision become part of a process. It's not a moment in time. And I think everybody in this moment that we're living in with technology and the immediate gratification and clicking and liking, and everybody wants it now and then to move on. And that is not this part of life.
It isn't. And the other thought I have, and that's a really insightful example, and I've seen that happen so many times, is anxiety. And understanding that this is a situation that creates anxiety in people. The families have stress and anxiety, worrying. And so unsupported anxiety, people do lots of things. You realize, what I do when I'm anxious is I try to control a certain problem. And so in unsupported anxiety, people do exactly what you described. You go in, we got to move, I got to get going, because they're anxious and it's uncertain. And people have a difficult time, all of us do, with uncertainty. We want to know, even though we really don't know, we think we know. And so in that, the older adult's anxious, so is the family. So it also contributes to this collision of, you need to do this, no, I'm not.
Yeah. There's just so many unknowns. When we live in this black and white, that is yes, no, okay, we're going that direction. It's like a roadmap. But the gray of life, that uncertain. So I feel like that's a great transition to the book, because not only is it trust, but I think that adult kids can get information through this book. I'm like, it is so packed of information as far as the process. We kind of went over some of the emotional part. What are some of those challenges along the medical side? As you see your parents and you go, oh, I think I need to get some information. If that's you should be getting this now. You should be getting this book now, The Fragile Years, and start. You don't know where your parents' health process is going to go. We don't. Is it going to be a cognitive decline? Is it going to be a sudden something we all have to make decisions in a matter of hours? So in your book, what are some of the medical challenges that you see that at a high level, maybe to give our audience some insight?
Absolutely. So we all know that an older adult is going to be in the hospital. So understanding how hospitals work. We all know that inevitably there's going to be a placement in a rehab facility. What is a rehab facility? Was it a skilled nursing facility? There might be interactions with home care. What's the difference between private duty home care and Medicare home care? What is hospice? Is that really end of life? What is palliative care? Does Medicare pay for it? Does Medicare not pay for it? I'll get to the financial systems in a minute, and then it's what I call the transitions. We absolutely know that an older adult is going to be transitioned from home to the hospital, hospital home, or hospital to a skilled nursing facility to an assisted living facility. And then you have the whole list of medication issues that can create complex medical problems if they're not analyzed properly. So as much as you can, and I'm speaking to the audience here, as much as you can learn about those systems and how they work. What's a common discharge protocol? What happens when you need to be admitted? What are the important questions to ask. For instance, is my parent getting admitted under observation status, or are they getting admitted as a patient? That seems like a basic question. If you think they're going to get admitted and you think they're going to be a patient, but what does observation status mean? Read the book and find out what that means. So get educated with each of the systems and how they interact with each other, so that when your older adult enters one of those systems, you're more comfortable with the language and the possible situations that you will be dealing with.
Yeah, and that's, you state very clearly that, and I mean, I've known this, but I don't think I've ever heard it stated such as hospitals are not paid to maintain the care of the patient, only to cure them. And so if there's not that cure, they're not there to maintain. And so the maintaining has to happen somewhere else. And where is that? And what are your options? And I don't think a lot of people know the difference between assisted living, skilled nursing. You bring Medicare into the conversation, and you're looking for an expert. You're looking for an expert to help you navigate that. If you have access to VA services that are covered. I mean, and so in the book, you do break down what those equal. And as far as ratios of once your loved one has gone into assisted living, or you're looking at which one to go to, a lot of people think, oh, how much is it going to cost? That's, of course, one of the higher levels of which way do you go, but also like ratio of medical staff versus your loved one. What kind of medical staff should people be looking for? And I guess is this kind of zeroing in on the assisted living side of things in this conversation?
Well, what I'll say is with assisted living industry, in my opinion, is in a crisis. And they are selling assisted living as a medical model, when in fact they are providing a social model. And by that I mean most of the assisted living facilities do not have a nurse on staff. So if you have an older adult that's being admitted into an assisted living facility with multiple medical diagnoses, you have to get your expectations in line with the fact that there's not a nurse in the building. So before deciding to move into an assisted living facility, if you do need a nurse, that would be the number one question I would ask. Is there a nurse? Are they on duty? How many hours a day? Who gives my parent their medication? I can almost assure you it's not a nurse. It would be a med tech. So families go in with an expectation that I'm going to move my mom in and all her medical conditions are going to get managed, and it's not true.
Okay.
So when there's a disconnect between what's going to be provided and what is needed, then the tension begins to be created around, why aren't you doing this? Well, we're not staffed to provide that. And I would say, Lisa, that this is just one example of a situation in the fragile years. You might be having a complicated conversation with a hospital. They want to get your parent discharged, yesterday. They want to get them out fast, and you have nowhere for them to go. You don't even know how to look. You don't know where they should go. And then if I backed up even further from that, I would say, and this is the hardest conversation to have, what is your parent's budget? What's the financial picture? Have you had that conversation? Those are hard. I can tell you right now, I asked my dad about his finances 2 years before he finally got vulnerable with me to say, this is how much I have. And you have to know that. Otherwise, you're making a decision to move a parent into someplace, not knowing whether you're going to be able to afford it or not.
Oh my goodness, yeah. And read the book. Even if you don't think you need it right now, now's the time to read it, because you have to have time yourself to absorb this and understand it. You have a roadmap, your roadmap of, okay, we're talking about this, we're going in this direction. Because again, these things happen so quickly. Like you say, when somebody is said to discharge, but they can't go home safely or go home without some kind of care in place. For those listening, what is the difference between home health and home care?
So There's private duty home care, that's the industry term, for private home care that you pay out of pocket to keep yourself taken care of at home. You can also have private duty home care in assisted living or in the hospital, but typically it's at home. You purchase this care to help with bathing, dressing, going to the bathroom, walking, preparing meals, etc. Home care, if you say home care, that's Medicare home care. And that is care that's being paid for mostly by Medicare, and that involves skilled services. And skilled services, by definition, is services that are provided by a person with a license: physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy. And you get home care, physical therapy, X number of times per week for X number of weeks under the Medicare guidelines. When you get that physical therapy, you also are supposed to get what's called a bath aid. And I call it the drive-by bath. They're there to give you a bath, and then they go to the next house. So sometimes people think that they're going to get Medicare covered home care for a longer period of time than they're really going to get it. And the average amount of time that you get it is 2 or 3 weeks. So when you say private duty home care, nobody says private duty. They use home care for everything, but not if you're in the industry.
Okay. And so the Medicare side is going to last, you said, probably 2 to 3 weeks. And then if your loved one hasn't turned the page and is able to be independent again, there needs to be another solution brought in.
That's right. And say, for instance, you're in the hospital or your parents in the hospital, and this has happened to me, I would say, thousands of times. And the discharge planner, a nurse that's responsible for getting people out of the hospital, will tell the families, you're going to get Medicare home care. Well, what the families hear, if they're hearing much because they're under so much stress, is they're going to get the care they need every day, and it's not true. And the hardest part of this stage really is when they've entered the fragile years and they don't need 4 hours of care a day, which is usually the minimum. They just need an hour or two. And the older person doesn't want to start with 4 hours because they don't want a person in their house for 4 hours straight, and it's expensive. They want to start with an hour or two. This is the hardest part. And the minute I let care in the home, it's the beginning of the end for me. I've heard people say that the minute I let them in, I've lost my independence. And it's true. It's true. And I don't take that reality away. You have them. But what are you preventing? You're preventing a more acute problem from happening down the road.
Yeah. But for them, that's admission to the decline that's happening.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And so is there a ballpark? I know it's hard to throw figures, and we're recording this in May of 2025 because things will live out there for a long time. And I know when people write books and they put in numbers and then everything changes, it can become just a nightmare. But as far as in the world we are today in the year 2025, is there like a ballpark? And I know, we can talk city rates, and then rural is different, and even the access in rural is an issue. But is there like a ballpark of what somebody pays for private duty care?
Oh, I think this is great to even bring it up, regardless of whether it's going to be appropriate. Absolutely. I would say, depending on where you live in the country, it can be $25 to $60 an hour.
Okay.
The important thing is to call and find out what those rates are. And what is the minimum number of hours you should purchase.
Okay. And that is and that's just a ballpark, and if we all do the math, that's going to add up really quickly either way, on the lower side or the higher side, those numbers. But that's a significant amount. Multi-generational living, because we're talking about finances, and there's all different kinds of like life plan communities, and you pay a certain money to go in, and then the care, you're expected to have the care within as you need it, whatever stage that goes to. And then assisted living, and we're talking about having private duty home care. Do you have any evidence in your 30 years? Do you see that as an option for people when they do see a decline, offering that space within their home?
I think that some families it works beautifully, and I've seen, accessible dwelling units, the ADUs being built in the backyard, tiny houses, developing an apartment within the home. I've seen that work beautifully. Most families that I've worked with, they want more independence. They don't want to be underfoot of their children. And that most of the time. So if the conversation is open, and then I've seen other families where there's 3 kids and they just go, every 4 months to each of the kids, and that works great. So I think that the question is, open up the conversation, listen for what's possible, and if there's agreement on both sides that this is something we want to continue to explore, then continue to explore it, because it makes life easier in a lot of ways because you can manage it right in your own home. The downside is it's hard to get a break.
Yeah.
On both sides. If you want your own personal space, it's hard to get. But I think what I would recommend is broaching the subject, having a conversation about it. And then the other interesting trend, now that you mention it, is we're seeing more and more older adults move back up north. I worked in Florida for a good number of years, and I started helping people move back up to New York and Massachusetts and Michigan. One, to be near their children instead of wanting their children to move down near them, going to be near their children, but going back to their home. They realize when they retire away from their community, their religious organization or their Rotary Club or their whatever that they missed it, so they went back. It's just an interesting trend.
I think that's significant, and the role of community and how that plays, because there's so much benefit. We see the stats now about isolation, and it's equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day, and that is startling. So I think that speaks to how we just want that community around us. But I could see them going, like you say, going back home, wherever that is, and having that almost built-in support system again.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I haven't I haven't heard that, but I think that's really interesting, and I can see why.
Yeah. And the other thought I would want your audience to really listen for is families don't know what they don't know. And one of the biggest problems that I've seen with families in the fragile years is they don't know what they don't know. So, one, buying the book, absolutely, get that foundation, but also take the time to maybe look around for a care manager in your area. aginglifecare.org is a website that if you wanted to go in and have a consultation as to what does your local market offer, get a quick consultation to learn specific things about your area, and use that as an additional foundation to help your parent, or compare where they are to where they might be thinking of moving. Even earlier when you brought up, thinking about moving into a life care plan community. Do you move in when you're in your 70s? Does that differ from when you're in your 90s? And I would say a resounding yes. Somebody that moves into it pays an entrance fee at 90. I think that is a really questionable financial move. Works for some, but not for everybody. But don't go in uneducated, if not just in reading material, but a specific person in your area that can help you with that area and what you should know to help your family member.
Okay, and you said that is to locate a care manager. As far as resources, the podcast is called Not Ready Yet. We hear that I'm not ready yet over and over again. Do you have any advice for those listening if that is the response from their loved one?
Yeah, the first thing is, earlier when I said listen very carefully, something will be said by your family member that will really benefit from a follow-up question. For example, My father said that his good friend Walt was in the hospital with a bad knee, and he was scared that he was going to die. And I said, what are things you think about? Did that happen to another friend of yours? As a way to listen for how he was perceiving being in the hospital.
Yeah, for a knee injury or for a knee
Right,
repair.
right. He subsequently died, and it really scared my dad. His friend Walt died. My dad said he died by hospital. That's how he interpreted it. It was a very sad thing for my father, but it was an opening, and it was the first time that we really bonded together to look at his life. So listen carefully. The other is framing the conversation, and this is a real thing. I want to know, and this your family member saying this to the older adult, what do I do in an emergency? That's all I want. If there's an emergency, I want to have a little plan, and I want you to like my plan. I don't have to implement it, but I want you to be okay with it and just to get some things down. Would this work for you? Just in case I get that scary call, I have to fly across the country. I want to know what I should do to best help you. And I want
Yeah.
you to tell me what you want me to do. That's another way to kind of get that conversation started.
Well, and that's a great segue into the logistical challenges because, I mean, I want people to just be prepared. I'm hoping that if you're still listening this far in, that this matters to you and your family, and you want to be that person that initiates and says, let's be proactive. And so, like you say, to approach them with in a, you know, God forbid, worst case scenario. And I'm not that person that likes to throw things out into the universe. I wear my wooden bracelet for a reason. I'm knocking on that thing all day long. So I get it. Like sometimes we feel like even bringing these conversations to light is inviting something in. And I think that's why so many times things are not spoken about or talked about. So I definitely think that approach, because that worst case scenario, should it come up, to have insight on what they want, what their wishes are. I know there's, we're more familiar with the do not resuscitate, but I understand there's, dementia directives now. And at what level, and and I say I'm really big on agency. I think every episode I use that very big on agency. Like, this is, be the narrator of your story. And so having that conversation and bringing that up and saying, in worst case scenario, what do you want? Like, what if I do this, you're going to be okay with that? And not second guessing yourself on these decisions, because as we're making these decisions, if we haven't had those conversations, not only are the decisions so unbearably stressful and emotional, but then you're also under this, there's this underlying, gosh, I don't know if they want this. But if you have the conversation, that eliminates that. It gets rid of that underlying questioning what somebody wants. So at least give yourself that freedom to be a little bit more stable in the decisions. So that's a great one, is just going in and saying, let's talk about this worst case scenario if a crisis happens. We're hoping everybody has their, we call them the mature life tasks, like have your directives in place, talk about a power of attorney. Just have those things before you need them. What other things do you think we should be talking about with our loved ones while we can?
If you're not living near them, then I would get to know the people, or a person at a minimum, in their life, get their phone number, and then get a way to make sure that you can contact them if you can't get there fast enough. Maybe it's a neighbor, maybe it's a member of their temple, maybe it's a person that they play bridge with, someone that knows them that you connect with and get their contact information. The other is, if an ambulance is called and they go into a person's home, most of the time they go to the refrigerator to see if there's any contact information. It's a weird thing, but that's what they do. And so I would want you to have on the refrigerator who to call in an emergency. and a list of your medications, just to create a little file that you can keep covered so that not everybody can see it, but pertinent information. Who's your doctor? Who are your emergency response? Who are neighbors that they can call if they need to? What are medicines are you on? What are your medical diagnoses? Just to make sure that in an emergency, that information can be accessed.
Okay. And I think I've heard of the file of life. So in an emergency, all that information is made available to whoever. Because, we have this scenario in our head that we're going to be able to tell people stuff. And that
Right.
just may not be the case, We have to, that is one thing I feel like in this country, we talk more about how not to age than we talk about the reality of aging and what it looks like, and being proactive about not the face cream we use, but how we are prepared, and having these high level conversations with our loved ones. Like, I want people to stop being afraid that they're going to die, because we are going to. What we can do is have clarity and peace of mind with our loved ones. And I mean, that is priceless. So again, the care manager, when you call them in, what would be some high level questions that you would be asking them? Just so I know, once we start talking in a medical world, it's a lot of us feel lost. Like, what would that conversation even be like? Do they come meet with you? What does that look like?
What it looks like is any way you want it to look. That's what I love about working with a care manager. You outline the scenario and you work together as to, is a visit appropriate? Will it work? And what are some ideas to make it work? Because everybody's different. I've been asked, should I be there when you go meet my mother? And I defer that question back to them. What do we need to make this visit most successful? And maybe you should be there, maybe not. Maybe you're there and then you leave and give us some time alone. So ideally, it's set up with the care manager after giving them the background of what's going on, and that's the beauty, because it's personalized to your situation. Sometimes meeting at the home is not a good idea. Sometimes I had a couple, and they really wanted the formality of my office, and that was great. Come in and we'll make it. They wanted to sit behind a desk, me behind a desk, and them on the other side. They wanted like a meeting with their lawyer. And then another woman didn't want me to come to her house because she was a hoarder. She didn't say that, but she was embarrassed. She didn't want me to come in her home. I had a woman who didn't want me to come in her home. She was a hoarder, but we met in her driveway. We sat in her driveway. And so that's, the start is whatever will work. And the other thought I would say is if there's anybody out there and your parents aren't in the stage yet, set up a yearly call or a yearly meeting, just so that it's a habit. I had this happen years ago. I had a daughter and her husband, and we met every year with their children. And this happened when the diagnosis came that put them in the fragile years. For them, it was Parkinson's. Everybody had communicated for, I want to say, 6 or 7 years, that it was like a natural transition to talk about what care was needed.
Oh,
And it doesn't
yeah.
always happen, but my hope is that it will happen more and more. The more podcasts like this are heard and listened to and encouraged. I love that you're doing this in an area that really needs it. And the more people talk about it, the better job I think we're going to be doing getting what's in this stage. And what I mean by that is it's potentially the most intimate time you will have with your family member. Everyone's vulnerable. And that's what drew me to working with older adults, is it's intimacy and honesty and a real connection.
Yeah.
And so by learning how to navigate this with your family member, you are increasing the possibility of having a deepened connection with them.
And not only that, you speak of in the book about when somebody does pass and the peace that that they feel and can be surrounded by. You've experienced that, and then you've also experienced the other side of it. You had talked about the peace around some of the people when they're passing that you've seen and experienced, and I would think that goes together having that, I mean, we say peace of mind all the time in every other way. We talk about peace of mind, do this, peace of mind, check this off, have this in place, make sure this is executed. I mean, I think that it goes hand in hand, but you do reference that in there that I would wish that for anyone that I love, to have that be your surrounding as you exit. And what a gift is in a way to your family, that you've prepared not only yourself in the process, but mentally and emotionally as well, if we're given that chance. Because so many people pass suddenly and they don't have that opportunity. And I always say, if you're still here and you have the opportunity and you can position this and make your own roadmap towards what this looks like for you and your family, my goodness, take that opportunity. Take that opportunity.
Yeah, I support that wholeheartedly, and it's a beautiful thing to watch. It's so beautiful. Someone that is really supported in dying and knows they're leaving, said their goodbyes, the unresolved baggage is, resolved. There's nothing like it. And everybody grieves, no matter what your relationship was like, everybody does. But there's some peaceful grieving that I would want, that I have had with both my parents, actually, that I would want for anybody. And conversely, I've seen the difficult death and things that weren't resolved and things that were fought. And I feel sad at that missed opportunity for all parties. So people are scared, and it's really appropriate to be scared, but know that you can be scared and take an action despite the nervousness you feel.
Yeah. Agree 100%. You're listening to the end, and that this gives you the power in your voice to bring something out that, again, I say in the beginning, we need to speak these quiet parts out loud. If we're having the thought and the concern, then don't let that just consume you and do nothing with it. Taking that action, bringing it to light, bringing it to voice, letting it be a conversation. I'm encouraging all to have that time. Maybe in those conversations, it helps the loved one also build a bridge over that fact of denial. When everything becomes more of conversational and not so taboo, and it's not ridden with fear or shame, then we accept it and it becomes more commonplace. So I want to make sure before we wrap up, if you have anything, final words you'd like to share, something that we didn't share that you feel we would be remiss in not saying.
No, I don't, Lisa. I just hope your audience pulls from this whatever they need to enhance this part of their life and the life of their family members. Thank you for asking me to be here, and thank you for the work that you're doing.
Thank you, Amy. It has been such a pleasure. You are a superstar to me, and I just really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much. Appreciate everybody listening, and we'll see you next time on Not Ready Yet, Curating Conversations for the Aging Journey. Take care for now. Thanks for joining me on Not Ready Yet, Curating Conversations for the Aging Journey. If something in this episode gave you clarity or the courage to start an important conversation, or offered a new way to look at things, I hope you'll share it with someone who might need the same encouragement. Remember, navigating aging isn't something we have to do alone or in crisis. With love, logic, and the right tools, we can face what's next with confidence and connection. Be sure to follow or subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you're feeling generous, leave a review. It helps others find the show. And just a quick note, the information shared on this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not intended as a substitute for medical, psychiatric, legal, or other professional advice. Always consult a qualified professional for guidance tailored to your unique situation. This is Lisa Harper, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye for now.